Hey folks, ever since Dragonflight first came out, I've completed countless 60 to 70 speedruns in an effort to find the fastest leveling route, and I've finally settled on one that allows me to consistently reach level 70 in only 2 hours. In this video, I'll explain how you can follow my route and level your characters up very quickly, but I want to give a quick disclaimer for any new players watching this video. If you're just starting Dragonflight for the first time, you'll need to complete the entire campaign to unlock endgame content, and this guide is aimed purely towards people looking to level up alts as quickly as possible. That being said, I have a separate video which goes over the most efficient way to complete the campaign while leveling your first character, so you should watch that for now and return to this video later if you decide to level anything else. With that out of the way, let's jump into the guide. For starters, it's important to establish that this route is primarily based around Dream Surges, a new permanent world event added midway through the expansion. The reason it's important for leveling is because you can gain up to 75% additional experience from all sources, and it's an experience modifier so massive that it effectively forces you to play around it. For reference, the only other multiplier you can gain for 60 to 70 leveling is by turning on War Mode, which gives you anywhere from 10 to 30% increased experience depending on how outnumbered your faction is. On that note, I will also recommend that you enable this if you really want to level up quickly, though there are inherent risks present as many people may attempt to gank you along the way. Now, shifting back to Dream Surges, there are a few additional crucial details that we need to discuss. While I did say that the Dream Surge event is always active, it won't always be in the same location. The event rotates every single week in a counterclockwise pattern throughout the 4 Dragonflight zones. If you want to see which zone currently has an active Dream Surge, you can open up your map and look for the greenish-blue icon. Since the aforementioned experience buffs will only apply to the zone in which the Dream Surge is active, your leveling experience will vary greatly depending on the week in which you choose to do your leveling. This is especially important since the 4 Dragonflight zones are nowhere near equivalent in terms of how efficient their quests are, and this means certain weeks are much worse for leveling speeds than others. Since I'm sure most of you are already wondering this, the most efficient zone by far is Azure Span, and Thaldraszus is easily the worst. Waking Shores and Onaran Plains are roughly equivalent, and while they aren't bad for leveling, they're still significantly behind the speed of Azure Span. In case it isn't obvious, the aforementioned 2-hour leveling time that I referred to was specifically in regards to Azure Span weeks. While it's hard for me to say exactly how much faster this zone is compared to the rest, since there are a lot of variables that influence your leveling speed, I would estimate that Waking Shores and Onaran Plains are roughly 1 hour slower, and Thaldraszus would likely take twice as long. Now, as you can probably imagine, this makes it extremely difficult to put together a reliable speed leveling route in Dragonflight, since you would effectively need to make 4 different combinations of quests to account for which zone is currently empowered. I'll touch upon this more towards the end of the video, but I will state the obvious and say that if you're trying to level as fast as possible, you should just mark your calendar for the next Azure Span week and wait until then. Trust me, I know that this feels really bad, and it's one of the reasons I haven't been enjoying speedrunning in Dragonflight nearly as much as other expansions. But I can't change the systems that Blizzard put into the game, all I can do is teach you the most optimal ways to play around them. Before I discuss the routing, there is one final topic that we need to go over. Namely, how the experience buff actually works. Earlier, I said that you can gain up to 75% increased experience, and as you can see on screen, this bonus is actually due to a combination of 2 separate buffs. The one on the left, Dreaming Winds, provides you with 25% additional experience, and this effect is constantly active whenever you're within the zone buffed by the Dream Surge. The effect on the right is a little bit different. Every 30 minutes, an NPC within the zone will allow you to vote between a choice of 2 different buffs. After the 30-minute voting period is over, the buff that the most number of players voted for is granted to everyone in the zone, and it only lasts for another 30 minutes. There are 12 buff options in total, and the 50% experience increase Dream Surge Learnings is one of them. This means that in order to get the full 75% experience bonus, you'll not only need to wait around for this buff to appear as a voting option, but it then needs to actually win the popular vote. This is, without a doubt, one of the dumbest systems that Blizzard has ever added to this game, and yet, a 50% experience bonus is absolutely massive, so we need to play around it. Now, just to add a bit of additional context, the same buff can never appear as a poll option while it is currently active. So, for example, if you currently have the 50% experience bonus, there is a 0% chance for it to be a future poll option, which means it'll always go away for at least 30 minutes when the next set of buffs kick in. What this means is that even if you have perfect RNG, the 50% XP buff will only be available during every other voting window. However, one of the 12 options is called Dream Surge Overgrowth, and this causes all 11 of the other buffs to activate at the same time. Unfortunately, this buff is extremely rare when compared to the rest, but in theory, it is possible to get the 50% experience buff, then have the Overgrowth option appear and grant it a second time, only for the 50% XP buff to appear immediately after. I say theoretically though, because I have yet to see this sequence of events actually occur during any of my speedruns, though I do know it's possible since I've seen screenshots of this occurring. Regardless, the odds of this actually happening are basically astronomical, and I don't even bother playing around this during my runs. No matter how you slice it, maintaining this 50% experience buff is an annoying but necessary part of Dragonflight speed leveling, though I do have two methods that I'd recommend in order to make this process a bit easier. For both of these methods, before you begin leveling from 60 to 70, you should wait for the Dream Surge Learnings buff to appear as the winning option. When I'm doing my speedruns, I'll then start the timer 5 minutes before this buff is active. This gives me a few minutes to get through the Dragonflight introduction quests, so that way I arrive in the Dream Surge zone right as the 50% experience bonus activates. I then have 30 minutes to complete as many quests in the zone as possible, after which the buff fades away. This is where you have a choice between the two different methods. The first one is what I use for my speedruns, since they're single segment runs done from start to finish with no pausing of the timer. This means I'm completely at the mercy of RNG as to whether or not another 50% buff actually appears, and no matter what, I'm forced to continue leveling for 30-minute intervals with no 50% bonus. To account for this, I'll usually switch zones immediately after the 50% buff fades and complete efficient questlines in areas outside of the Dream Surge. Even during Azure Span weeks, leveling exclusively in that zone with the 50% buff will only get you to roughly level 68, so you'll need to complement this with other sources of experience. Ideally, you'll only want to level inside of the Dream Surge zone while the 50% buff is active, as that will maximize the experience you're receiving by completing those quests. This means it's a more efficient use of your time to level outside of the zone when the buff is down, and then check back every 30 minutes to see if it's back up. It should go without saying that once the 50% buff is returned, you can go back to the Dream Surge zone and continue leveling there. This method is obviously a bit complicated, and while I am forced to use it due to the inherent nature of speedrunning, I would only recommend you follow it if you're dead set on leveling from 60 to 70 in a single sitting. That being said, I know based on my conversations with countless WoW players that most people prefer not to level in this manner, and will instead work on leveling their characters across multiple short bursts of time. The good news is that this type of leveling actually works perfectly within the context of Dream Surges, as you can just level for 30 minutes while the 50% buff is active, and then log out until it appears once again. If you did this method perfectly, you may actually be able to reach level 70 in less time played than my current world record, since I only had 1 hour of uptime on the 50% buff during that speedrun. With all of that finally covered, we can discuss the optimal routing for 60 to 70, and thankfully, this is the easy part. By and large, the most efficient quests for Dragonflight leveling have remained unchanged since the expansion launched, and the only thing that's really different is the new experience modifiers from Dream Surges. As a result, the routing itself just involves following the campaign quests for each zone and completing a handful of efficient side quests along the way. If you want a detailed breakdown on exactly which quests you should ignore, I've documented that in the written guide on my website, and you can find a link to that in the video description below. You could also follow along with my full speedrun videos, as I try to provide commentary throughout the run which explains exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. However, I do understand that many of you don't care about the minutiae behind speedrunning and just want a general understanding of the fastest way to level, so I'll give a brief overview of the most efficient questing route through every single zone. Keep in mind that you'll want to prioritize whatever zone has the active Dream Surge, but you will still need to complete questlines from other zones if you want to reach level 70. In Azure Span, you should follow the campaign all the way until you reach Iskara, as the campaign slows down drastically from that point on. Along the way, you should complete almost every single side quest that you encounter, including the quests that unlock after reaching Iskara itself. From there, you can head to basically any side quest hub within Azure Span, such as Camp Nowhere, Lost Ruins, Snowhide Camp, or Theron's Watch. Azure Span is an extremely efficient zone, and you should aim to complete as much of it as possible whenever it's empowered by the Dream Surge. Additionally, if you've decided to level during a week when a different zone is empowered, Azure Span should be the only backup location that you use once you've exhausted all of the other efficient questlines in your chosen zone. As for Onaran Plains, the campaign itself is fairly inefficient, and it's actually one of the last sets of quests that you should complete. That being said, you'll at least want to finish the first few quests you get after entering the zone until you reach the hub called Timberstep Outpost. Every single quest in this area is worth completing, with the exception of Nergazarai. The only other truly efficient side quest hub in the zone is Lilac Ramble, which can be found in the southwestern corner of Onaran Plains. If you're looking for good quests to complete outside of Azure Span, these two hubs are fantastic options. Alternatively, if you're choosing to level during an Onaran Dream Surge week, I would only recommend doing additional campaign quests within the zone while the 50% buff is active. Otherwise, it's probably a better idea to complete quests within Azure Span, because they'll be faster even without the additional 25% experience. You may remember earlier that Thaldraszus is the worst zone by far, but there is still one efficient set of quests that you can complete. The initial section of the Thaldraszus questline is surprisingly fast, and I sometimes complete it during my speedruns whenever Azure Span is missing the 50% buff. The moment you finish the campaign quests within Southhold Gate and are redirected towards the Bronze Dragon section of the zone, you should abandon Thaldraszus entirely. This is the case even if the zone is currently empowered by the Dream Surge. I cannot overstate just how bad the campaign and side quests are within Thaldraszus. It is faster to do literally anything else, even when accounting for the 75% experience bonus. Finally, we have the Waking Shores, and this one is a bit interesting since almost all of the side quest hubs are inefficient and should be skipped. That being said, the main campaign through the zone is actually not that bad, though it does have a fairly lengthy RP segment at regular intervals, which makes the entire process a good deal slower than Azure Span. The most notable section of this zone can be found right by the start in Wingrust Embassy. The campaign in this area includes multiple minutes of unskippable roleplay, but the nearby side quests are moderately efficient, and you stay within range of the roleplay while completing them. That being said, the best reason to complete these quests are because of their proximity to profession trainers, which brings me to my final topic of the video, crafting experience. In Dragonflight, Blizzard reworked the profession system and made it so you could actually gain experience by leveling up your profession. Unfortunately, this system proved to be so effective for leveling that they've nerfed it continuously since the launch of the expansion. In order to gain the experience, you'll need to obtain the bonus for crafting different items for the first time. And as things stand right now, you'll only receive experience the first 15 times you complete a first craft bonus. This system is rather confusing and requires you to invest gold in purchasing the necessary materials, but it is really good for leveling efficiency as you're able to earn roughly 3/4 of a level in only 1 to 2 minutes. I doubt most people will care enough to do this for their alts, but I at least wanted to mention it within the video, and if you are interested in trying it out, the written guide contains a lot more detail on how to set this up. And with that, we've covered all of the important details that you need to know in order to efficiently level from 60 to 70 in Dragonflight. If you found this video helpful, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could toss it a like, as that'll help other people find it as well.